the roll call again, please?
Sure. Roll call.
Say it from the top.
Steve and
Ms. Mucko,
here.
Mr. Walker,
Here.
Mr. Clock,
Here.
Mr. Olson, Mr. Erkins,
Do I need to approve the minutes again? No.
Yes,
All right. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the work session minutes dated June 22nd.
No.
We're doing it again.
I move we approve the work session and regular minute.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving on to the regular minutes dated June 22nd.
I moved that we accept the regular minutes as written.
So I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Minutes are approved. On to the monthly activity and financial report, Cody and Anne Marie.
Thank you, Madam Chair and directors of the board. Appreciate your time today. I'm just kind of first quick little highlights on activities that we've had. Pat made a presentation to the CVB board on Boise Center's forecast last month, or actually earlier this month, and then Pat participated. This was actually last month. He reported on it briefly in his activities. He participated in an Urban Land Institute Zoom survey regarding the use of the fairgrounds. And then he also participated in a Meetings Today conference call, survey, and Idaho Business Review survey regarding Boise Center's reopening and forecast. I just note, I know Anne Marie is going to talk about this a little bit later, but we've got some numbers on GBTA predictions on a full rebound by 2025. And we're seeing that that's the national kind of narrative, but we're seeing here, and I know I spoke to this in my report last month, and then Pat did as well, that we're noticing that our region and also Boise Center is positioned very well. So we think that full rebound for us will be earlier than that, obviously. So that's just kind of regional versus national narratives. And then we continue to work on the contract with Idaho Competitive Aquatics, and we've got them on the agenda today.
So can you talk a little bit about the Urban Land Institute Fairgrounds?
Yep.
Is that just something that the Ada County had requested?
Yeah, or actually ULI put it together and then it did a format of like a panel of people, kind of how they could use that space best and what options were available. So
So it was more ad hoc, or was it requested by Ada County?
I don't believe it was just more ad hoc. So I believe ULI was the one that set it up. So
So any movement?
nothing that was decided, no decisions were made. More of just a kind of a throwing things at the table and seeing what they could use that space for. And I think there was I know I read the news article that came from the meeting itself, and they've talked about several different mixed uses down there. So.
Madam Chair.
Yep.
Cody, did you get any feeling from this group about what they see our participation is?
I did not get any feeling from that. I know that early on in the discussion, there was a talk about whether or not we could participate or not, but to what level, I think that's going to be dependent. I know where we're at financially is for us, a project that size would not be something we could do short term. So. Okay. Next, we've just got some AV hybrid and virtual event highlights. We've had this slide in there the last few months. We highlighted the June events that are on this list, but then we can see, as you can see, July also has some pretty heavy hybrid events. Studio 430 is finishing up this month as far as into the end of July. We're going to finish these events, and it has been turned into more of a mobile studio. So we are going to be programming that space again for events. So that's what's kind of driven the demand in that space has driven us to kind of make that studio more mobile so we can be flexible with it. But we do see great demand, and hybrid events is something that I don't think is going to go away. But one thing that we have, and I spoke to this, I think, as well in my report, that we're noticing a lot of groups are really wanting to come back to in person because a hybrid event, and I helped plan one of these for the association I belong to. It's like planning two separate events because you're doing a virtual component and an in-person component. And so a lot of places, in particular the association I belong to, we're looking at doing something where we would have an in-person event and then a separate, completely virtual event, and not make them at the same time hybrid going forward. So I think that we're starting to see that indicator in the industry as well. Visitor center statistics, visitors by location. There is one thing that I think rose to the top here that, and I believe it's related to the Far West Regional Soccer Tournament. But as you can see, Idaho kind of jumped to the top of that list. We don't normally have our top visitors from within the state, but I believe that was an indicator from the Far West Regional Soccer Tournament from different places in Idaho coming in and visiting the visitor center, and California, Oregon, Washington also were up there, and that kind of speaks to that Far West Regional Soccer Tournament. So. But we continue to see an increase in traffic for the visitor center, which is good for Boise. far as the financial numbers, they continue to look very strong. I would say that transfer of 350,000 to center for the month. Tax revenues were about 770,000. That's about 16,000 off in the same month in 2019. So we're getting back to pre-pandemic numbers. So I think that would be my important note to that would be the tax revenues at 770. We're only about 16,000 off from the same month in 2019. So continue to see strong rebounds in that. Cash position, Pat highlighted this last month, but I would continue to highlight it. There's a $6 million additional capital needs in there. That's not a one-year pull. That's a $2 million per year approximately. Just reinforcing the awareness to the next 3 years of capital needs are going to be, we have a 30-year-old building here that's going to need some HVAC. We pulled the ceiling project back due to COVID, but there are some safety concerns and issues that we're going to do from a rigging standpoint in that ceiling to make sure we're still able to adequately service groups like the Albertsons Open when they bring in a rigging for concert rigging. So be able to do that safely from our ceiling.
And with that, with the capital needs, that will be budgeted each year, correct?
Correct.
So we see what would be on tap for that year within the budget.
We do a 20-year capital rolling plan, so we know kind of what's coming down the pipeline. Some stuff gets shifted depending on if a life expectancy hits or we have a piece of equipment go out before, then we address it at that point in time and shift. As far as hotel statistics, the occupancy and ADR rates, we continue to see the rebound in occupancy. Each month this continues to go up. Fourth quarter continues to look very, very strong. So we're hoping that that number there in the middle continues to rise and we see it outpacing the previous years, in particular 2020 as we're doing much better. So. As far as demand and revenues, again, same kind of picture here. Room supply is stable, positive trend were noted. Continue to see the STR reports myself, and I'm excited about what I saw from the most recent one. So next month's numbers should be continuing in the same direction as you guys see. Far West Soccer, I think, gave us a nice little boost as well. So as far as the sales and marketing and public relations side, Boise Center conventions in the pipeline. Ali spoke to this in depth last year, but the convention pipeline rebounds and continues to exceed 2019 levels. Even from, I looked at this slide from last month prior to this presentation, and we continue to see great numbers increase on these reports. 11 conventions were confirmed in June just alone, total of 6,360 definite future room nights. So 3.8 million future economic impact. So again, we just highlight that the second tier markets continue to be very, very strong. I think Boise's seeing some groups that we normally never would have been able to compete for or get because they're looking at doing more of a regional meeting, or they're just looking at going to a second tier market due to the complexities of travel to one of those first tier markets, and you've got to get everybody close together, a little more congested, and as far as public transportation goes. So I think we're seeing some great demand come to the second tier market, and Boise is benefiting from that as well.
Do you see that more as outreach from the team, CBD and the team here, or is that?
Combination, yes, I believe.
Like
Two
they're
part.
reaching out?
Some of it is part of it, just that we're happen to be one of the only regional convention centers open still. So that's helping, but the sales team is doing a great job of getting the word out and letting them know, hey, we're open and we're available. So combination. Again, looked at this slide last month, and we've actually added a few of the grade A convention grades. Strong demand for last minute bookings as well. But the conventions, we're starting to see some of those grade A conventions, and I think that's an indicator of what I just spoke to about the second tier markets having an opportunity to go after groups that normally, historically, we wouldn't have been able to. We actually received 20, and this is more about just to highlight the short-term bookings and what we continue to see in the demand. We had 24 inquiries in the last 6 weeks, and 12 of those have dates on hold or contracts signed. So about exactly half of them have actually gone to some form of on the calendar or to a contract signed. So that continues to be a great indicator as well on the short-term side. Questions from me on my report?
One question.
Yes, sir.
Go back a slide. So the normal business we do is local.
Majority, yes.
Is there any increase in that? Have you noticed an uptick?
Yes, the demand compared to it's back to about 2019 on the local side. There is a compression in the fourth quarter, so we're starting to see some of that into next year, meaning the February dates, because they can't get into October, September dates are so congested due to COVID. So some of that's being pushed out into the next year. So the local demand is still very, very high.
Great. Thank you.
With that, I will turn it over to Anne Marie.
continuing to, if you look at in the circle, and that's the combined variance. So we have a positive variance of revenues to budget, or revenues less expenses of $1.4 million. You can see in the second column under district that $1.3 million of that variance is from the district. And it's because our tax revenues are running significantly above budget. We had anticipated that tax revenues would be lower, and as Cody had alluded to, we were like at 98% of 2019 levels, and it looks like next month is probably going to be a record month. The STR report we got showed that there's about like $20 million in room revenue, which normally runs somewhere between $10 to $14 million. And the average daily rate's $140. And, you know, it's hard to tell always how that will translate out to tax revenues because of the tax exempt business. There's some indication that quite a bit of that was government, but indications are that we're moving in an upward trajectory and it doesn't seem to be stopping.
Is that 140 district-wide or just downtown?
That was not just downtown. Apparently, there was one hotel that had been asking for $400 a night during the Far West soccer tournament, and that wasn't even downtown.
There was a couple things going on Far West Soccer and
And
then
there was a pickleball
pickleball
ball
tournament.
Oh,
tournament.
yeah.
So that we think
Yeah, yeah.
that was literally knocked it out of the park.
So, in the Boise Center, as you can see, the variance there is $39,000 to budget. Revenues continue to be slower than anticipated due to the slower recovery from the COVID, but we are managing expenses and still maintaining revenues over expenses or under expenses to budget. Again, with the district, we're $1.2 million over budget. The two circles, one is comparing it to 19. We're 98% in 2019 and we're $400,000 over budget year to date. SG&A expenses continue to be below budget due to the timing of expenses. Consulting is over budget. We're starting to see some of the bills coming in due to the aquatics project. So that is to be expected. The positive trends, events are picking up in the Boise Center. We have 15 events last month, up from 4 from the prior month, and up from 2 in the prior year. The event days increased by 8, which is a 38% increase. Room nights are up from 730 to 1,122, which is a 54% increase. Day visits were down. Kids for a Night went virtual instead of doing an actual on-site. Normally their attendance is about 800 people, so that is contributing to the lower day visits. Utilization increased 68%, and I'll show you the utilization on the next slide. Revenues increased 139% and up 151 from prior month. AV revenue continues to run over budget, about $30,000. We've implemented bonuses for hiring and retention. That's one of the challenges that we'll continue to face as we move into the fourth quarter. We have pretty high utilization, and the challenge is going to be finding the staff, like anybody, right, to service those events. The gross profit was positive. The EBITDA loss was $92,000 less than the prior month. And the net loss was less than budget by $101,000. Year to date, our gross profit our gross loss actually continues to exceed budget due to the lower revenues. We have fixed costs, which we've maintained. So when your revenues are less, you're going to have a higher loss on your gross profit. We've managed to control the SG&A expenses, which has offset that change. And so overall, we're about $30,000 in budget. So this is the utilization slide. Apologize, I noticed that the square needs to go over to June. But if you look at the yellow line, you can see that June was fairly low, but when you get to July, July starts creeping up, August. Then you go, I'm sorry, it's the black. And then August is going higher, September's up, October's up, and then November drops back down as normal. But we really are seeing that utilization move up, and when it starts getting into what we call our optimal target range, it gets really hard to try to fit other events in around the events. So we try to stay within that 50 to 70% utilization in those. Some of those months you can see are in there or getting pretty darn close. The operating trend, again, here's the revenues, the monthly operating revenues of 175,000. We're at the second highest level since March of 2020. We're projecting at this point a forecast of around 3.3 million. And that's a minimum. We book about 50% of our events in the year for the year. And so when you were asking high about local events, we'll continue to book those local events from month to month. So the forecast is just currently what's on the schedule. You can see in those fourth quarter that the budget's the dotted line, and you can see that our forecast is above the budget in those months, which is a good indication.
On that last slide was Festival of Trees, is that in there?
Festival trees were not included on that November slide.
Okay,
We're
so the
actually-
November would bump it up. right?
Way a lot. So yes, that's actually one note. That's a very important note. That is not included. We were waiting till Friday. We should hear back by them whether they can sign their contract. They're currently waiting, excuse me, on their operating arm to sign off on whether they can or can't based on current rates. So it is possible. They are planning on moving forward with it, but it's out of, there's an operating, I think it's Trinity Health is who makes that decision.
And just, we talk about the road to recovery, and as Cody indicated that most of the GBTA indicates that, 2025 will be the full recovery for business travel. But a lot of our market right now is coming from the local and just the pent-up demand. In this middle box, you can see there, it says 40% of companies responded. And this was as of last 2 weeks ago. So 40% of companies have responded that they've resumed non-essential business travel. And that was compared to 34% from the month before. So we're starting to see businesses starting to pick up on their travel, which is a good sign for the convention industry as well. Any other questions? Thank you. We'll see you, I guess, next, or Tuesday, July 20th.
Nice to see you in person.
Or August 12th, sorry.
Well, I know that, yeah, that's gonna be, and that's when we'll start the budget.
Yep, we'll have at least our first budget discussion.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Monthly activity and financial report approved. On to other business. I'd like to invite our guests from Opera Idaho if they'd like to come up.
Today we have Mark Junkert and Leslie Garrett from Opera Idaho.
Thank you. I'm Leslie Garrett. I'm currently serving as president of the board of Opera Idaho. And this is Mark Junkert. He is our general director at the Opera. And just for those of you who aren't as familiar with it, a general director in an opera company handles both the artistic direction and the administrative direction. Why are we here today? We are here because Boise needs a mid-sized performing arts theater. As the community grows, audiences for the arts grow as well. And the need for such a theater will only increase with time. And one significant sign of this, Opera Idaho recently performed its first Opera in the Park a free event at the band shell in Julie Davis Park. At that event, over 1,000 people attended. Due to the size of a project like this theater, bonding would probably be required, and we recognize that that would put the project several years still into the future. But we want you to have this project in mind. Why Opera Idaho? Opera Idaho is uniquely affected and by the lack of such a facility. However, there are many organizations here in Boise area who would use a mid-sized theater. And that would be a theater of 900 to 1,200 seats. Mark will go into more of the detail about the particulars on what we would like to see. Some of the history, and I think this may have been provided to all of you. Opera Idaho has looked at this for quite some time. And for the last 10 years, it's been part of our strategic plan goals to help move the idea of a theater forward. The history that we have in working with other venues here, and prior to 2010, Opera Idaho performed primarily at the Morrison Center. We made a change in that, but some difficulties including cost of using the Morrison Center, which has been mitigated to some extent by the Morrison Center Endowment Foundation. But there are acoustical inadequacies for unamplified singing, which is the ideal way to hear and appreciate opera. The inability to fill all the seats at the Morrison Center, scheduling limitations, and lack of nearby restaurants and other options to make a wonderful evening out. We began in 2014, we made a commitment to the Egyptian Theater that we would perform at least 2 operas in that theater. There are difficulties with that theater, and which was built as a movie theater. There are no dressing rooms. There's no orchestra pit. There is no backstage. There is no fly space. And if you saw the recent article in the Idaho Press, you would know that we use rooms at the Grove Hotel for dressing rooms and makeup. And then the singers walk down the sidewalk in costume, wait outside the theater in costume until their entrance cues. So in 2018, we moved ahead toward this, our pre-architectural study. And our stated goal is to lead efforts to create a home venue in or near downtown Boise that will allow for performances of the highest quality.
So in 2017, even though it was completed in 2018, we commissioned Auerbach Pollock Friedlander, a company out of San Francisco, who was involved in consulting for the pavilion at Sun Valley. Some of you may have been in that. And also more recently, the Argyros Performing Arts Center in downtown Ketchup. And we had a close tie with one of our board members to that company. So we asked them to produce for us what is called a pre-architectural study. We wanted to know the following things, I guess. If we had a 900 to 1,200 seat theater, what would be in it? How many dressing rooms would there need to be? What size would be adequate for a stage? What type of plumbing would there need to be, et cetera, et cetera? And once you knew that, what kind of a footprint would that take? We wanted to have an estimate of cost, and we wanted to have some ideas of where, and all of that is incorporated in this study. We'll highlight some of it for you. Study cost us $25,000 to complete, plus another $9,000 was paid for by Kay Hardy and Gregory Kaslow, owners of the Egyptian Theater, so that APF could take a serious look at the Egyptian Theater. Could this theater be made into a theater of 900, 1,200 seats that would be adequate? And the beginning part of their study did talk about all the existing venues, including the Egyptian Theater, and concluded that none of them were quite adequate for our needs. There's a long section. I think we did send this to you. I don't know if you had a chance to review. It's a quite long section in it about the Egyptian Theater. And you know, it served us well. And it served other people who perform there or have events there well, but it was not designed for what we do. And while it may be charming to read an article in which characters from the Opera Madama Butterfly are walking through downtown in costume on their way from the Grove Hotel to the theater, I can tell you that the performers themselves do not appreciate that moment in life. It was determined that a new theater would be optimum. If we go to the next slide, they came up, oh, do I do that? No, you do, thank you. They came up with 962 seats. The assignment had been 900, 1,200. That worked for me on 2 or 3 levels, depending what you call a level. This is the bottom, the pit level. The next one is the lobby level. And the next one is the parterre level, and followed by balcony levels. So there are your levels. The final one shows one more. The final one shows it from the side. This is 82,653 square feet. It takes up about a half a square city block. Now that's without any park in front of it. This is the physical space that we and others would desire. If we would go to the next slide, you can see the colored part is the theater plopped on a city block. It happens to be the city block where the Esther Simplot Performing Arts Academy is now. Not that all of it is owned by the Esther Simplot Performing Arts Academy, but it's an example of how much space it would take up. This particular one leaves in place what is now the Boise Philharmonic rehearsal space, because the theater has no rehearsal space in it of significance. It has a warm-up area. It was determined, and there are other locations that they suggested. They're somewhat irrelevant in that they're just spaces that they saw. What they did determine in their study was that most people wanted this to be in downtown Boise and in what is known as the Cultural District, and you all know where that is, right? Which is one of the few cultural districts in North America that does not have a major theater in it. We have Boise Contemporary Theater, and that's really it. Next slide. The cost estimate for this, I don't know if you can read that there, but this is 3 years ago, so these numbers are either low or totally blown out of the water by now, I don't know. But the estimate of cost, depending on how much per square foot, 500, 650, or 800 square foot building costs, are anywhere from $41 million to $66 million. And on the next page of this, you see the beginning of a couple of pages of non-theatrical or theatrical systems and equipment costs, totaling about another $6 million. And that would be the cost. So we learned everything we needed to learn from this study. And it, there's also an extensive list of participants at the back of this, of people that were a part of this interview process. It's not up there for you, but you can see it. Idaho Shakespeare Festival, Ballet Idaho, Cabin, Boise Philharmonic, Curtis Steigers, a number of people with no commitment from any of them that, oh, if this were built, I'd perform in here X number of days a year. The city of Boise, Department of Arts and History, and I think in conjunction with the library project, did a study, you probably are aware of that, in 2018, around the same time, as part of the library project, looking at what size of a theater was needed. And so those numbers are available, but again, they're not real commitments on the part of anybody. They're estimates. As Boise has grown in the last 4 years, I suspect the use of such a theater would be more if surveyed today. The project was stalled on our end for lack of a lead donor. And the study has sat there in the meantime, although we have had other forays into other things, and Leslie can tell you some of those things.
Okay. So, as Mark said, we definitely feel the group that participated in this study felt like Boise would be the best location. Opera Idaho also feels that way. And as our community grows throughout the valley, we know that Eagle and Meridian have considered theater projects and will probably continue to. So if Boise doesn't make a plan soon, it potentially will go somewhere else. And that'll be the end of that. We do think that downtown is ideal because of the nearness of other services and restaurants and the arts offices and so forth. We have had some and will continue to have conversations with developers about how a theater like this might fit into a project that they have. And those, obviously nothing has come to fruition that gives us, this is where the location would be yet. But that's one of the things that we're working on. So again, we wanted to put this in front of you so that when the time is right for you and other factors, that you can help us make it happen.
And one of the things that, if you want to give us some feedback, one of the things that would be useful for us is, since this isn't really a proposal at this point, what would be needed from us if we were to come back in a year or two or something with a fuller proposal? What aspects of this presentation don't have that in it?
So I think on our website, we've got that whole listing on how to propose a project.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that I would be interested to see, you know, with this project, would you guys be leading the charge in conjunction with other arts organizations, Shakespeare and Ballet Idaho, and, you know, who else would be going in together? And then, you know, have Mike work through all the legalities of, you know, if there's multiple people involved on your side, then if the district's involved, then we have to operate. I mean, it's
Probably, yeah.
so we'd have to work through all that, the legality side of things. Is this location a potential, or is that just to show scale?
It's just, it really, I think they didn't have any sense really as they put out the 6 or 7 locations there. You know, what was available, what wasn't available. This one's more logical because it's land already owned by the Esther Simplot Performing Arts Academy for the most part. There's a little bit of it that is not.
So more as an example.
Yeah. Okay.
And there have been other, since that, there have been other locations floated by us at time by the city at one point, you know. But again, that's a ways down the road, it seems to us. But although it may be ways down the road, but there's not as much available land, is there?
You said that there would be other arts groups working in this, because we once did a study with Esther Simplot.
Right.
Basically the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
The Performing Arts Center. Would they be involved as well?
The Simplot company, you mean?
No, Esther and Ballet Idaho.
Yeah.
Or
We would assume, I mean, we're the organization, we feel this is a need for us particularly, but other, you know, Others have said, oh, yes, sign us up. But what does that mean? Until it becomes real and, oh, we have to go raise money. It's easy to say that, but I think there's a need.
Well, I think
No,
I'll share with you, because,
Sorry,
ahead.
but I agree with you. There is definitely I was gonna follow up on yours. There's a need for this kind of facility in Boise, especially with the growth that it's going through. But it has to be a facility that is available to other arts organizations.
Well, yeah, we would, Opera Idaho needs a facility 4 weeks a year. You know, other organizations would use it all the rest of the time.
well, that's what I would think from our perspective, some sort of cooperation with the other arts companies, because we've been asked from other arts companies before for participation in projects. And one of the things that if we focus on that, the criticism is, well, if you're gonna give your money, all this money for a capital project for Ballet Idaho, you're essentially becoming the kingmaker for that performing arts company, because that capital campaign will take the concentration of all the arts donors within that area. So to see some sort of cooperation between all the arts companies and have that a solid agreement that this theater is going to serve. I understand that the Morrison Center with the scheduling and cost and that it is not perfect for the performing arts companies. But if this theater is going to serve them all, then there needs to be a cooperative agreement up front, and then a group effort to maybe come and ask us for participation on that side of things. But also, I understand where your capital campaigns go right now. It's primarily to keep you up and running. And so if you have a project that people are going to donate to, then we want to make sure that that's impacting all the performing arts companies, because it is important to our business to attract the type of groups we want, attract the type of businesses to locate in the city, that we need a thriving performing arts community. I believe that. I think everybody believes that. It just can't be auditorium district standing alone in that. It has to be, we'd like to see that your capital campaign has started down that road so that you have skin in the game, we have skin in the game, and then there's other groups that can participate too. Great.
Thank you.
And I know that have you spoken to do you know who the developer or the owner of 8th Street is now? Of 8th Street? It's
Oh, yeah.
Hendricks.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Yeah,
They were talking about redoing the movie theater, and I don't know.
Yes,
We-
we looked at that.
We toured through it with them, and we actually sent the blueprints to APF, who gave it a quick look, and there are too many central beams. It's easy to make 9 theaters out of one. It's not easy to make 1 out of 9 existing ones. They just said it's just not possible without gutting the whole thing. And the first floor is already taken by the food court. But yeah, we did look at that. And we'll look at all sorts of things. I drive by the Armory twice a day, and I love it as a place and a thing. And I've talked to the owner of that a few years back, and we keep talking, and because we want to see this happen in my lifetime.
And the Armory, is that the one
Yeah, on reserve or
over
whatever.
by St. Luke's?
Yeah.
Okay,
And it has limitations structurally, road-wise, and the location is not central, and roads going out to it. But it's a nice place, and in Portland, they took one of those and made a nice performing arts center out of it, but it more centrally located.
yeah. Well, I know that this has been a project, that has come up before the board many times and has been a talking point. So if you guys are kind of leading the charge, great. And stay in communication with and I think Pat may have explained our finances to you guys as far as what we can bond for. And so we're probably 3 years out before we can even really start looking at projects of a larger scale. So I would say, keep in contact. Once we start kind of getting closer to that point, reach out, let us know how things are going. But I would say certainly not from like what Jim said, from your side, if you can get some sort of, I don't know, consortium together,
Right.
however you want to work with all the arts groups to where it comes as like, we are a united front. On your side, this is the arts groups from Boise who would like to have this, and how that might work out. And, you know, what portion of that you'd be looking for from the auditorium district, that would be very helpful.
I mean, I'm sure I can speak for every other arts group that none of us can do this alone because
Yeah.
we don't have the capacity to do it. And we're all busy working on our own seasons and stuff. So it would have to be a consortium, a new organization put together, or something like that. To really take this and go with it. We've done what we can kind of to this point. We'll continue to kind of press it forward as much as we can, but at some point it would have to be a consortium, another organization, something.
Have you talked to the city at all about being involved?
Off and on through the years, most recently when the library project came up, you know, there's discussion of putting a theater in there. It ended up being, and it started out as a study of what size theater is needed, and it was determined that all three sizes, small, medium, and large, were needed, but they kind of went with the footprint that they had, which was then small, you know, black box theater. That didn't come to fruition, but that's where that project ended.
I think, addition, one thing that might be important for some of our stakeholders, which is the hotel owners, is a study of the people who attend the events, and so that we can report that, you know, if we invest in this project, that it is going to help us put heads in bed, because X number of the patrons are from out of town, and they do book hotels, they go to restaurants, and it's not just anecdotal, it's something that you can give us hard numbers on.
And the city at least has done studies in this area, so we wouldn't have to do that alone either, I think. I came from a meeting with the Department of Arts and History, and there were more numbers that we were looking at, not those specific, but they have the capability to do that kind of study.
Yeah, so certainly that, the room nights and then economic impact.
Yep.
So, you know, with people staying around, that's certainly something that we feel we're charged with, is helping improve the economic impact of the district. So, and do you have any points as far as legal things that they should be thinking at this point? So that we don't get down they don't come down the road and have to redo things.
I'm sure, I think the challenge will be, as we've, further we're looking at a baseball or sports facility or the, aquatic center, et cetera, is the, our statutory requirement about the need to, own, operate, et cetera. And so I think, that's just in general going to be the road we have to go down. So but I think to Mr. Walker's point, frankly, arguably one of the nice things would be if we had 6 or 7 or 8 different, arts groups who are interested in utilizing the facility. That arguably makes it a little more logical for the district than to, in fact, own and manage in some fashion the entire facility. But yeah, I think probably the bigger issue for us will simply be that in some fashion, we have to sort of, control it. So, putting that together then makes it challenging with the donor money and everything else. But, the good news is, frankly, particularly if it's donors and other folks that are contributing money to it, then it's a lot more logical that then there's a governmental entity that is running it and managing it. It makes it all fit a little more seamlessly than with private parties. So I think, famous last words, I think we could probably get there in terms of a legal structure that'll work. I think it's the rest of it that becomes more challenging.
And the ability to bond probably is going to require the participation of CCDC as well. So I don't know if you've given presentations to them, but that's for us to go beyond what we have in our accounts to leverage that. It's going to require the participation of CCDC.
And we have experience, you guys have experience doing that with Boise Center East. So it's been done before, working with CCDC.
Which we like because we do our benefit at Boise Center East.
Yeah.
I would say, and that's a really good point. The other, I mean, that might be the one reason to look at a slightly different area in which to locate it is that CCDC's bonding capacity is generally 20 years for each of their areas from when they start to finish. And so, it may well be that, we can identify a, bite-sized chunk that, somewhere in the downtown area that isn't yet what they're doing, that might free up some flexibility in terms of them being able to do something as well.
It just has to be a current active zone from what I understand, because their debt on some of their parking garages has existed beyond the dissolution of that zone, but it's got to be within that 20-year period that it's.
It has to be within that 20-year period. And then you've got, every year the legislature puts new limitations on their ability. So it's, it gets a little more challenging every year, but yeah, we'll just want to, we just need to be thoughtful about what their limitations are. But, they've got good creative folks over there who can, hopefully mix and match things as we need to. So.
Any other questions? Any other input from the board?
Thanks for your
Thank you
time.
for coming.
Thank you.
Maybe the fairground.
Yeah, maybe the fairground. County to county. All right. Mike, I want to turn it over to you. Does ICA, do you guys have some updates?
Sure.
You want to just come up?
Thanks for having us again, guys. Really just a couple quick updates and I'll let Mike expand on this if we need to, but essentially the contract that we've been working on, at least the legal teams have been, all the deal points are finalized. I think we're just waiting on those final drafts to come out and we'll have signatures on those soon. So everything else on that side has been ironed out. Right to add to that.
Yeah, I think we, kind of got our signature in place. We're actually just kind of waiting to put together a couple of the exhibits and get the final signatures, but I believe all the deal points are done, so.
Yep. And then the other exciting point, and I sent an email to Kristen and Pat about this, and I know one of the concerns from some of the constituents was whether or not we'd be able to bring events here and bring people to the valley to this pool. And Nick and I last Monday presented to what is the western section of USA Swimming. And a really brief overview is that there are clubs, and clubs are organized into these local swimming communities that are kind of like Southern Idaho, it's called Snake River Swimming. And then that local swimming community is part of a broader section. And so there are a few sections within the Western United States, the two largest of which encompass all of the Western United States minus California. And those two sections combine to do a championship meet every single year, twice a year, spring and summer. And we met last Monday and placed a bid to host the 2023 summer meet here in Boise. And we were competing against the pool in Mount Hood. And the group that was selecting was essentially the 30 coaches and administrators in that Western US, and they chose Boise as the host site. So that meet will have 700 kids, only 20 of which will be local. So it's predominantly out of town people coming in. Based on the numbers that the CVB has ran for us in the past, that should generate between 2,000 and 2,300 hotel room nights and close to $2 million in economic impact just in that one weekend. That's a 4-day swim meet, so 5 days in total. So very excited. People are excited to hear about it. Nick was actually at that meet this last weekend. It was held in Austin, Texas, at the University of Texas. And he just spent the time kind of walking around deck and meeting people and introducing them to Boise and our project. And everyone generally is very excited about it coming up here. So positive news, and obviously we still have a pool to build, but we've got a couple of years to get it done. It's not going to take that long, but we're excited to have that meet in 2023, and we're going to keep putting our name out there to bid for other needs as well along the way. So that's all I had, unless there are any other questions for us that we need to answer for the group.
What is the age range of that?
So it's really an open-ended meet. So you have to meet a specific qualifying standard. So that meet is really designed for essentially kind of the top swimmers in the Western US that would meet at qualifying centers to be there. There are younger kids that can qualify. I don't know, what's the youngest kid you saw there, Nick? Maybe 13?
There was an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old were the two youngest there. The oldest people there were 22. The University of Denver swimmers swim for top swimming in Colorado. They stay at school all year long and train. And so that was their meet as well. So 11-year-old is pretty young and fairly aggressive to go there, but anywhere from 13 to 23, 24, basically.
So it's a little bit different meet, you know, the meets that we might host, a typical meet that you'd host, for example, an age group meet here, the Y meets that are held in spring and Thanksgiving meet in November. Those are what we call age group meets in which there are designated age groups, right? There's 8 and unders and 9, 10-year-olds and 11, 12-year-olds that are kind of locked into those specific groups, but this is an open-ended meet. So the 11-year-old was competing against the 22-year-old, and it's all just based on qualifying times and being able to qualify for the meets.
So a good portion of those would have parents or
The
something else trying
majority,
to-
yeah, the majority of those will have parents and coaches and chaperones and support teams that would be in attendance as well.
So how many more events can you land before we break ground?
We're working on it. We'll actually be presenting again in another month. Check it, I think it's in September this year, the USA Swimming Convention, in which we can put a bid in for what's called the Western Zone Age Group Championship. Basically the same group of same geographical area, but that is an age group meet. So that would be encompass 10 and unders and 11, 12s and 13, 14-year-olds. About the same size of meet, 800 swimmers. And that meet is typically in August of each year. So we'd be able to bid on the 2023 timeframe. So we could end up very well with 2 meets kind of back to back, month to month. It would be larger meets. But obviously, once we kind of start to get in that circuit, then we'll be able to continue to bid on others. So we're working on every chance we can. And a lot of it will, of course, just be creating our own meets, right? Not all meets are bid based. A lot of them are just simply that we decide to have a meet, and that was part of Nick going down there and meeting a lot of people and introducing them to the project. And so if we decide to create a swim meet, then we can send invitations out to those clubs and have them come up for the meet. So
Cody, how many romantic nights does the Far West generate?
I'd have to go back and look to find the correct answer for you. I'm not exactly positive. Significant amount.
it's a lot, yeah.
Yeah,
Or around the 10,000.
it's, 10,000 above for sure.
So our plan is really more about having those meets on a regular basis rather than that soccer tournament that's kind of that one core week or 2 weeks, however that's spread out. You know, we're targeting that 15 to 20 meets a year that'll happen every, 3 weekends or so, and then be able to put some of these larger meets like this Western section meet that we can put in kind of what we call those championship seasons, which are typically spring and summer.
And have you updated that information on your website?
I don't know if we've got that. We've asked our webmaster to get that up.
We found out last week that we got the 2023 championship, so he has that information and should be up this week onto that, as well as the location of the pool and all the other updates that we've had.
So we can continue to push people that,
Absolutely, yeah.
That direction.
Yeah, we're trying to keep those updated as we can, so.
and then you're working with the CBB, just because, my concern is if you get a meet and it's on Far West soccer tournament time,
Right.
then nobody's gonna be able to find a hotel room and we're up the creek.
Before
So
we did
miss-
the bid this last week, I worked with Brandon at CVB,
Perfect.
and
Yeah.
he told us that it wouldn't conflict. This meet is either July 13th through the 16th or 20th through the 24th of 23. Just depends on USA Swimming schedule, the national schedule, once they bid and put out the US Open, which is US Nationals, the other meets fall in line.
Cool, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then it would be a great problem to have that we don't even have enough hotel room.
That's
anymore. That would make the hoteliers very happy.
But it was interesting, when we went through that bid process, there were a few questions, everyone's, people were wondering, not concerned, but wondering about elevation. And once we said, hey, it's 2,500 feet, no one batted an eye at it. People were worried about proximity of hotels and how many were available. And we had the CVB run hotel numbers, and there are 3,700 hotel rooms within 4 miles of the pool. And, once we kind of laid that out, there was zero concern from anybody. So it was a good meeting.
Less than 10 minutes to the airport and
And,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anything else?
Madam Chair, sort
Yep.
of maybe a few logistical things. Well, one of which is, I think as the board recalls, we're going through effectively a public procurement process. And so the RFP went out on Friday, Ryan?
RFP was posted in the Statesman on Friday. It'll be posted again this coming Friday with sealed bids to be opened Friday, the 30th.
So, in terms of that process, at some point in August, hopefully, we'll have all the numbers and everything all figured out. And I don't know, I can't remember if, obviously you've been working with various folks. I mean, the numbers are still sort of obviously still waiting on bids in terms of actual costs and whatnot.
Yeah, in fact, Pat and I have a meeting tomorrow, kind of a conference call in which we're going to be speaking with 3 different vendors that provide either fabric type style building or metal type structure. And we kind of have estimated costs on some of those, but it's more about learning more about the structure and introducing those people to Pat, so he's a little bit more educated on them. And then those things will fit into that broader construction budget.
And then just to remind the board, again, before, one of the requirements before we actually purchase the land is that ICA, demonstrates that they've got the money to do their part of it. So that's kind of the first shoe to fall in terms of the district committing funds. And, then from there, and it's the bid process, all that's going to be going on, simultaneously, more or less. And then the process from there is building it and having all Ryan's events.
That's right. And we had, the closing date was scheduled for August 5th. The seller did have an option to extend the closing because they're working through their own exchange, I guess. And so we don't have a firm date, but it will occur between August 5th and October 5th. As soon as they're ready to go, then we'll be notified and then we can move forward on that. So district can keep the money in their account for a little bit more. And then as soon as we're notified by the seller, then we'll be good to close.
So possibly a little bit of a extension on the timeline.
Correct.
And as I said, I think the timeline that, Ryan went through in his last meeting, perfect world by end of the year, but really realistically, we're looking at next spring, correct, Ryan, in
Correct,
terms of,
yeah.
So I don't think anything's.
Open date.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was-
sorry.
Sorry?
For ending.
Yeah.
For you being able to swim your laps.
I know, it's actually pretty close to my house. I'm pretty
Perfect.
excited. Yeah. Any questions for
All right. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
congrats on
Yeah.
the swim meet? Keep them coming.
We're excited about it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you. Seeing no other business before the board. Adjourned.
I second.
Yeah, adjourned.